Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Today, that man is our very own Kevin Sheehan, of course, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show, right here on the Team 980, 10 to 1 daily, as well as the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast, where he spoke with a guy you might have heard of. His name is Sam Howell, the quarterback of the Commanders. Mr. Sheehan, how are you, sir? Welcome back from vacation and such.
Thank you, Craig. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I don't know if people can tell, but my voice, I feel like, sounds terrible right now, which is just my favorite thing as a radio host.
Well, it's not what you sound like, it's what you say. So just remember that. Because in this long-form environment that we're in, think about all the terrible voices that have been successful. Mad Dog Russo, Tom Lavero. It's not about voice, it's about content. I think play-by-play actually is more about voice than what we do, but anyway.
You know what I think we should do? Next June, when we have nothing to talk about, we should combine for a 3-hour simulcast show, and we should discuss that. Does voice matter for 3 hours?
Why not?
What else are we going to do? All right, so you guys talked to Howell. What were your impressions of him, actually being on the other end of a conversation as opposed to all the sound bites that you've inevitably played over the last 6 months of him being QB1 in town?
I mean, I think, everything that we've heard, on the record, off of it, seems very apparent and intuitive, and that is, he's humble. He's a guy that isn't entitled. He is willing to work. He's willing to be coached. Like all of the intangibles, and let's face it, over the last, let's call it 11 years, there have been a few quarterbacks in town that have not been the easiest to deal with. There was one here last year. And so that's encouraging. And then, you just combine it, Craig, with his talent, his skill set fits today's game. And so you hope that, there's a chance here. I mean, we're not going to know anything. I don't feel I'm going to know anything anyway. I know a lot of people feel they already know, bless their hearts. But I don't think I'm going to know anything until I actually watch him play in games that matter. And he really hasn't played in any game in the NFL that's truly mattered. And so that'll start on Sunday. But he comes off as a really nice young guy, and that's everything, pretty much all of us have heard about him.
So I think it's interesting, and I certainly have some level of perspective on this. I'm not as young as Howell, but I grew up with SportsCenter, being there my whole youth and my whole teenage years. And I think that there's a certain thing with athletes, I'll say slightly older than me and younger, which is basically at this point, as I'm 33, all of them, where they grew up not wanting to be the bad story on SportsCenter. They've grown up in these 24/7 news cycles and environments. And if you've just kind of paid attention enough, you know how to say the right thing to make sure that you don't wind up on the wrong end of a soundbite and being the talk of the town for the wrong reasons, et cetera, et cetera. That said, there's also guys that genuinely come by that and that are, good talkers, good interviews and whatever, because that's genuinely who they are. What was your impression of Hal? Is this a guy kind of playing a role, playing a part, or do you think that he really has his head on as straight as everyone seems to come away with?
Yeah, my takeaway was there's nothing fake. There's nothing, in the way of playing a role. There's a self-awareness there. Look, the people that can handle those situations and come off as authentic because they are, those people all have a level of self-awareness that the people that don't come off that way don't have. And I would guess that this is a guy that's always had that level of self-awareness. And so it's kind of hard not to like him and hard not to root for him. I don't know what he's going to turn out to be. He's, never played the position at this level, but he's played a lot of football. And, look, that position is more than just arm strength, throwing with anticipation, throwing with touch, processing speed, mobility. There's so much more of an intangible side to that position, and we've seen it so many times over the years where if you don't have that other stuff, you better be outrageously gifted and talented, or you're not going to hang around for very long. And so at least my sense of it is we go in knowing that part of it is real. He's humble. He's willing to work. He's willing to be coached. He gets along with people. People like him. That's not an underrated thing. And the rest of it, we'll see if he can do it.
Kevin Sheehan is with us here on The Hoffman Show. Of course, the Kevin Sheehan Show and the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast, where you can check out the full interview with Sam Howell. Also, I'm sure there's many bets to be had, so I will ask you, I'll combine the topics, Kevin. Howell, I know we did this on Take Command, over under 17.5 touchdown passes, and the number's right around 3,000 passing yards. How do you feel about those two numbers for him this season?
Denton and I did this on yesterday's show, I think. Because I think they're committed to seeing this through. Now, not at the expense of terrible play that doesn't give them a chance to, compete, or if they decide, it's a project that may not pay off in the end. Other than that, and I think his floor is relatively high. But again, who knows until he starts playing games. But because there's, kind of a commitment to him, because his floor may be a little bit higher than most unproven young guys, if he plays 17 games, he's going to be over on both of those. That would be the side that I would take, because I would think that he's got a chance to, play 17.
I agree, and that's what we said, is like if Logan and I agreed, especially on the touchdown number, if he plays in every game, and really the yardage number is like $180 a game. It's really not that much. And how they run their offense.
In aggregate last year threw for 3,700 yards or something like that, and it was a bad offense.
Right, and how Bieniemy wants to run it, some of the easy yards and touchdowns he might pick up on shovel passes and things like that. It really does come down to the health side. I also thought it was pretty funny because I was like, well, let me see. What did Mahomes do just for kicks and giggles in this offense last year? You reminded he throws for like 50 touchdowns, and all of a sudden 17 seems like an insulting number.
Well, yeah, but, it's just like the 6.5 on the win total. The odds makers don't believe or don't know enough about the quarterback situation here. I don't think anybody really knows enough about the quarterback situation here. I'm always surprised, and I did a call segment today on how many people think that they absolutely know right now that he's going to be a franchise quarterback. And they might be right, but I don't think it's based on anything they've seen to date. But the reason those numbers are low, as are the team numbers, is because of that position. It's completely unknown. And by the way, they're in a division where the other three quarterbacks are known and are considered to be decent to much better than decent.
Right. Actually, that leads me to an interesting sidebar conversation that I think you're a great person to have with. Kevin Sheehan's with us here on The Hoffman Show. And we'll talk about this more in our next segment, Never Read the Comments, because a lot of people like to, this time of year, talk about strength of schedule. And I think that's ridiculous because we don't know the strength of schedule, both from injuries, which could happen, which I realize isn't very fun and doesn't make for great radio because, anything can happen. Like, cool, good segment, Hoffman. Great show you got going there. But there is this reality that over the course of a long season, injuries pop up. And, if I had told you Daniel Jones is actually good at the beginning of last year, you would have looked at me like I had 7 heads. Things do evolve as time goes on. So how much stock do you actually put into strength of schedule as we look at things in a preseason preview mode with no actual games played yet?
By the way, if you don't have an opinion, as long as you're passionate about not having an opinion, then that's kind of the opinion.
Is that how that works? Anthony, I think we figured it out. I think the show just got unlocked. Yeah. I just have to yell louder.
Look,
me and my terrible voice right now that needs rest.
You just did the bit that I've been doing for like 15 years because Andy used to get so upset with me when he would say, like on, schedule shows or, Monday morning quarterbacks. He goes, why don't you want to go through the schedule and pick a record? I'm like, I'll do it, but don't you understand? Just go back last year, look at the schedule, and consider the games before they started to play them that you thought were definite wins, definite losses. And I guarantee you it's like the opposite. It's just like for years of the 6 playoff teams in each conference, and now we have 7, half of them each year would be, where did that come from? So if those teams, by the way, you mentioned Daniel Jones. How about Jalen Hurts? We're a year removed from people thinking, I don't know about Jalen Hurts. And the Eagles considering, this is his prove-it year. And he was borderline an MVP candidate. So we don't know. And the most important thing about the schedule is injuries aren't, they're a major reality in the NFL, and you can't predict them. And many times it's not who you play, but when you play them. And you can't predict that. Now, I think Sunday we can predict that the Cardinals aren't supposed to be and probably aren't a very good team. But beyond that, you just don't know who's going to be there. And the NFL's not even year to year or month to month. It's week to week. We've all learned that as NFL fans. Things change so dramatically. So yeah, it's worthless to go through the schedule, with the exception of the Chiefs. If you've got them on your schedule, that probably looks like an L for most teams.
Right. I'm not going to sit here and be like, we don't know what Patrick Mahomes is going to be. Yeah, we do.
Exactly.
You're going to lose to him. That, 9 times out of 10. Them's the breaks. But I do think it begs an interesting question within the division because the Giants are actually the most stable team in a lot of ways. I think, they got better, but they kept both coordinators. Obviously they get Jones the contract. I think they got better at some of the skill positions. Obviously, if Waller's healthy, they got way better at tight end, and it's beyond even tight end with how good that dude has been when he's been right in the past. But Eagles lose both coordinators. Cowboys make the offensive coordinator change that, a lot of people think is a downgrade, myself certainly included in that. Do you think the NFC, last year, the NFC East was surprisingly tough? You had all 4 teams in the mix down to the very end, and the Eagles and the Cowboys battling for the number 1 seed in the NFC. Do you think it is that kind of NFC East again, or do you think this is a bit of a comeback year?
By the way, you just described the schedule thing. Last year, the NFC East was thought to be one of the weakest divisions going into the season, and they had 3 playoff teams, had I think the 3rd best all-time aggregate win-loss record in division history, and nearly had all 4 teams in the postseason. I like the Giants. I'm sure I'll be wrong on this, but stability, you just mentioned it. Year 2 in Dable's system with Daniel Jones, who really started to play well at the end of the year. By the way, he protected the football last year. If Darren Waller, as you mentioned, is what he has been in the past when he's been healthy and been available, this is a team that I actually really am intrigued with, and I think the people that think that Washington is automatically like the 3rd best team and they're better than the Giants, I don't know. I think they're well coached. By the way, Wink Martindale, gambler, but really coached them up defensively. And I think defensively they've got talent. Plus they added, Banks from Maryland in the draft. I think that's a team that actually could contend for the division. But Philly still on paper is the best team.
Yeah, no, Philly's easy, and I don't think the coordinator thing is going to crush them. The team that I'm worried about, quote unquote, worry, because I don't care if they stink, is Dallas. Emotionally, I don't care, but and analytically, I do. I really think the downgrade is going to show up from Kellen Moore to Mike McCarthy drawing plays. I think they're putting way too much stock in Tony Pollard, who is 26 years old, coming off a broken leg, and has never been a lead back. And I still think last year they're 2 years removed from missing Amari Cooper now, and they don't realize that they miss Amari Cooper. And I'm sitting here on the outside being like, hey, you guys are missing Amari Cooper, and they did not replace him. Cooks is interesting, but he's not what Amari Cooper is. I think Dallas is on track for a surprisingly bad year, which, of course, will go over great in all media circles.
I agree with you on Kellen Moore. I think in terms of it being a loss, I don't know how much of a net negative it is with Mike McCarthy. I agree with you on Tony Pollard for sure. He's never been a lead back. He's coming off an injury. He's playing on the franchise tag. But you also have to look at their receiving core last year. They, didn't have Gallup. Remember, early in the year they were starting that guy Jalen Tolbert. Basically, all they had was CeeDee Lamb. They didn't have Dak for a few games. Interestingly, they went to more of a balanced attack with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I do think they are going to be nasty again defensively. And along with Bosa, who just signed that deal, Parsons is the other guy that, in the NFC that is a potential defensive MVP candidate. So I don't know that I'm expecting a massive drop off from the Cowboys, but I think that the coaching thing, which you started with, is a real thing, and it'll be interesting to see what they are offensively. But at receiver, getting Gallup back, adding Brandon Cooks to Lamb, I think will be helpful for them to have them healthy all year if they pull that off.
Kevin Sheehan with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, not just 10 to 1 here on the radio, but the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast, where you can check out his interview with Sam Howell. All right, let's bring it back to the home team and the final question here, Kevin, which is the simple version is, how important is this weekend? You talked about earlier, we think Arizona's not very good. You have all the hullabaloo of game one of the Harris era. Magic will be there. It's sold out, the whole deal. But it's also 1 week. It's going to feel, no matter what happens, win or lose, we know how it's going to feel to sit in these chairs and talk in these microphones on Monday, because it's 100% of the data that we have. But if you try to beforehand put some perspective on it, is it actually as important as a lot of people are trying to make it out to be, or do you not agree with that assessment?
Well, let me preface it by saying we are, for the first time as a fan base, in a long game situation where the long game has a chance to produce something which it never did before with Dan being the owner. With that said, Sunday is borderline have to have. And the reason for that is there's so much feel-good momentum right now. And it would be a short-term kind of halting the train in its tracks. It's not going to derail the train because the train is back on the tracks, and there's a chance long-term it's going to arrive, somewhere that's nice. Maybe, who knows? But it would be a gut punch. And the only reason it would be a gut punch isn't because they're losing the opener. It's because who they're playing. I can't remember, Craig, and maybe you do, in recent years, a team so universally believed to be the worst team in the league by a lot. And on top of that, they may be openly thinking long-term strategy as in Caleb Williams. Miami, we thought they were tanking in 2019, and then they got sick of tanking, and they put Ryan Fitzpatrick in the game, and they were much more in the lineup, and they were much more competitive. But I think it's the opponent and how bad they're supposed to be, and this perception that they may be tanking the season. It wouldn't feel very good on Monday if they don't pull it off. I don't even think any win would be nice, but what would really feel good and keep the real good momentum going is something like 31-14, 31-10, with Sam playing really well.
Right. Yeah, no, if they go out and they just look like, hey, all these national folks that think we stink, I know it's the Cardinals, but what more did you want from us? Like, Monday's going to be a party. If they lose, I don't want to come to work on Monday.
It's really a no-win situation other than the celebration that'll take place at the stadium, which will be awesome for everybody to actually, have a chance now and to feel like the franchise has a chance for the first time in a quarter century. But if they win, they're expected to win. And if they lose, it's a massive gut punch. But the league did do them a favor by scheduling this game because it's A, winnable, and B, there's no traveling fan base to mask what will be on Sunday, which is a sellout crowd of people rooting for the home team, which hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a game that I was on the beat that I had that feeling. Certainly that is, especially with a sellout. but very often it didn't even feel like a fully partisan home crowd. So excited for that. All right, last order of business on the way out, Kevin. I've just remembered this before we go here. The Take Command pregame show, which is now officially being called that, the Take Command pregame show with myself and Logan Paulson returns 3 hours prior to kick, so 10 o'clock this Sunday. For the last couple of years that we've been doing this, you have been gracious enough to join us each and every Sunday. Yes, I'm putting you on the spot live on the air. Are you in to join us again? 10:30 on Sunday.
Of course.
Excellent. If I didn't think you'd say yes, I wouldn't have asked you on the air. But I did.
Well,
we can make a big to-do of it.
No. It's always great to join both of you, and looking forward to a season where I think they'll here's something that's interesting, right? The last 3 years have actually been seasons that have had meaningful games in December.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this one won't, other than things you can't predict, like injuries. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I would say injuries, offensive line play, and if, God forbid, Sam Howell is not what we all think he is and he stinks, then it could be – I mean, it could be a frustrating year because they could go to Brissett and he could be good, and then we're stuck in the hell loop again. But we're not going to think about that right now. That's just a thought in the recesses of our mind.
November
And we'll deal with that if that ever actually comes up. Kevin Sheehan, everybody, 10-1 here on the Team 980 Kevin Sheehan Show podcast, and you'll hear him at 10:30 a.m. right here on the Take Command pregame show on Sunday. Thank you, sir. Talk to you this weekend.
All right, Craig. Take care.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.